What's up, everyone? I'm Debris. This is Summoner Wars, and today we're going to talk about optimal gate configurations. A gate has two essential qualities. First, you can summon units next to it, kind of making it like a expansion base or a base in StarCraft. And second, units can't pass through it, meaning it functions like a wall, which is what it used to be called in first edition. I'm going to go over a couple of what I think are the optimal gate configurations to use and show a couple of different ways they can be used, and also look at what to do with your second and then moving on to your third gate. Okay, so Takulu here is going to show us what a flat L configuration looks like. He's got two of them there actually. The L configuration, also known as the Knight's Move, is the optimal configuration because there is no overlap between the summoning points and the summoning points mesh into each other. This allows one gate to support the other. The L also allows you to move through the middle of the configuration there, encouraging the free movement of your troops. In my opinion, it's the ideal defensive configuration. Okay, this is what a steep L looks like. This gate configuration sacrifices the support that a flat L would provide in favor of a more aggressive forward summoning point. A steep L would have been rare in the first edition, and that's because most factions had starting walls further forward in the third row, not the second. From there you could just use a flat L configuration and you'd have the same effect as you would in this edition. That's probably the biggest change from second edition to first, is the ability to place walls next to your summoner in the offensive zone. And this is where the steep L has an advantage over the flat L. A steep L creates a launching point for your next gate placement deeper in enemy territory, as you're going to see here. It's harder to deploy a third gate beyond row 5 with support from the second wall when you're using a flat L. With a steep L, you can deploy a third gate as far as row 6 and still get support from your second gate. So here's an example of using a gate as a blocker. At the moment, things aren't looking too good for Takulu, so I will drop my gate in the 4th row and cover up her west flank with my deceiver. This is going to allow me to punish sneaks and have only one side exposed the following turn. Gates are great blockers because they have 5 life and cost a single card to play. That means they have 1 more life than any other 0-cost unit would, and you can summon units from them after. Okay, now I'm going to show you what a pincer wall looks like. See the 2 Beast Riders in row 3? I'm going to use Hypnotic to pull one forward, then drop a gate in its place. This is going to create a barrier which isolates one Beast Rider and prevents the other from attacking. Now, Takulu is still vulnerable to a counterattack by a Beast Rider summoned from the west face of Sneak's starting wall. However, if he tries it, it's going to cost him 3 cards and he'll lose that Beast Rider the following turn. Pincer walls were more viable in first edition when you could drop a wall in the 4th row. In second edition, it's unlikely you'll use it much in the offensive zone since it would leave your summoner vulnerable, but as you can see here, it still has its uses. Okay, so in an earlier example, we already saw a ladder strategy being put to work. With the deep gate, the second gate was placed deep in enemy territory. With the ladder strategy, each gate will be supported by the gate beneath it. Here you can see the second gate being placed in a steep L configuration with the starting gate. When I drop a third gate, it's going to once again be in a steep L configuration with the second gate. Obviously, it takes longer to establish yourself in enemy territory with a ladder, but once you're there, the enemy has a harder time getting rid of you. Whether you decide to go for a deep gate or ladder is a question of game phase theory, which I will explain in another video. Okay, this is what a deep gate looks like. This was my response to the two flat L's that Takulu deployed in an earlier example. Now this deep gate is way past my starting gate. I think I would need about 2 turns in order to get supporting units there from my starting gate. But the deep gate needs less support because of where it is. I've crowded in front of Takulu's starting wall and spent a pile-on event to destroy her supporting wall on the other side. What this means is that Takulu can only attack my deep gate from 2 sides. And even then, it's only if Takulu swings around and exposes herself. When summoning a deep gate, you should always try and seal off a summoning point if possible, while also creating a buffer between your units and the enemy units. Deep gates are not likely to last more than a couple of turns, but they buy you valuable time, which you should be spending to move in aggressively and start pinning the enemy down in their zone. Remember, the more summoning points you can seal off, the harder it is for the enemy to counterattack. I call this the narrow channel formation. As you can see, it's similar to an L-shaped configuration. However, the one gate is swept back onto the same row. In theory, this makes the walls less vulnerable, which is true. However, it comes at the cost of more overlap between summoning points and less meshing. For that reason, it's not ideal. It was more viable in first edition when walls had more health. It is, however, much harder to swarm and crowd this configuration than something like a flat top. I call this the firing line formation. As you can see, I'm able to put ranged units nearly the entire length of the board. The key point here is I don't have to move them to put them in an attacking position, and if any of them are destroyed, I'll be able to summon one in their place again without having to move anybody. It's a good formation to use for clearing out, say, the midfield or deeper. You need to have ranged units. The disadvantage is it can be broken through easier than the other formations. Okay, now I'm going to go over a couple of wall configurations to avoid, and the first one we see here is the flat top. Avoid the flat top. The problem with the flat top is that there's no space between the two of them to allow your units to get through. All the enemy has to do is situate their units on the forward-facing summoning points, and they become very hard to counter, and they can just sit there and chip away at your walls. You need the ability to move between your walls in order to defend them adequately. This should never be seen in a game. There's really no reason to see it there at all. The next one you almost always want to avoid is the column. The problem with the column is it doesn't really add anything to have 2 walls on top of each other. Their summoning points are essentially the same, and there's also considerable overlap between the 2 of them. The only time you might want to see a column is if the wall beneath the one facing forward is low on health and you want to preserve it, and that can sometimes happen. Very situational. If you don't have to use a column, then try to avoid it at all costs. This is called the step. This isn't the worst gate configuration. You generally want to avoid it if you don't have to use it, but sometimes if you do have to use it, it's better than the flat top or the column. Like the flat top, it prevents movement through the configuration. However, because it's staggered, it's harder to crowd that configuration, although it's still much easier to crowd this configuration than it is to crowd an L shape. Not the worst thing in the world. You will occasionally see it in games, definitely more. One final takeaway with gate configurations: you're not always going to be in a position to drop the perfect gate configuration. You do the best you can in the moment. And that is all I got, so thanks for watching.